Hi, welcome to Book Club. I'm C.M. Vasquez, author of The Birdcage Society Falling, the first in an ongoing psychological mystery series. Today, I'm going to be discussing Chapter 3 of Darkly Dreaming Dexter by Jeff Lindsay. So let's get started. Chapter 3 starts off with Dexter describing how crime scenes in broad daylight feel antiseptic and staged, and that there's a disarming quality to them. I think this is why a lot of horror movies take place at nighttime, or at least in darker settings. But I was never one for being afraid of the dark growing up. Granted, I did watch a lot of horror movies, and I do love horror movies. It's actually my favorite genre of movie. But I do think that it may have contributed to some desensitization, particularly in fiction. But real life horror still gets to me, so at least there's that. Dexter says that most people actually throw up at homicide scenes, but of course he never does. And I think, or he thinks actually, that there's something about the sun and Miami heat that makes people throw up less. I find that strange. And maybe it's because I hate the heat. Absolutely abhor it. But I feel that being nauseated and hot at the same time is definitely a recipe for vomit. So I disagree with Dexter's assessment. But another character gets introduced in this chapter. His name is Angel Batista. He likes to say no relation after he introduces himself, and I thought that was pretty funny because I'm not entirely sure who he's referring to, but I'm pretty sure that it's the wrestler and actor Dave Batista. So you let me know who you think he's referring to if you think that that is the Batista. Now, I also want to disclose that as I'm reading the voices the voices that I hear in my head are the voices from the TV show. And I think that because I consumed the shows first, that's just something that's going to happen naturally. And I would also like to point out that the actor who plays Angel Batista in the show, David Zayas, did a fantastic job. Just from the small bit of dialogue that Batista has in this chapter, I just immediately connected David Zayas to that character. But back to the book. When Dexter looks at the body parts in the trash bags, he remarks that they're very clean cuts, almost surgical. I think I know who's committing the murders, because I think I remember who it was in the first season. So if these books follow pretty closely, I should be right for who the main killer is in this book. And I say main killer because there's always a murder, or murders, I should say, being investigated as part of the main narrative. And of course, Dexter makes his own kills outside of these investigations. But Batista and Dexter end up joking about another character that gets introduced in this chapter, named Migdia LaGuerta, basically calling her detective skills into question, because it's known in the Homicide Bureau that she isn't good at her job, but she is good at brown-nosing. And that is how she ended up getting her job as a homicide detective. But before I get into more on LaGuerta, I would like to mention that the showrunners actually chose to change her name. So instead of it being Migdia in the show, they changed it to Maria. Now, I'm not really sure why they did this. Those names do sound similar. And I looked it up, but I couldn't find much information on it. I think that some people did have an issue with it as well, but it was never expressly stated as to why. But for me, and something that might be a little bit controversial, is that I have a feeling that the name change occurred in order to make the pronunciation of it more palatable for a white audience. Now, again, nothing has been confirmed, so I could be wrong, but it wouldn't be the first time a situation like this has happened. And I probably shouldn't assume the worst, but the show did come out in 2006, so it wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. But let me know in the comments why you think they changed her name and if you think it was a good idea. But I did it again. I talked about the show, so let's get back to the book real quick. More on the character Migdia LaGuerta, and yet another issue. So Dexter says that there are rumors that she got her position as homicide detective because she slept her way into that position. Now, we know this isn't the case because, as it turns out, she's just a brown noser, or a suck-up, as it were. But I do want to say that, of course, there are rumors like that, right? It's very common to see that when a woman moves up, she's regarded as lesser, that a woman couldn't have possibly gotten there on her own merit. Granted, LaGuerta didn't either, but I appreciate that Jeff Lindsay didn't make her sleeping her way to the top as the reason. Brown nosing isn't associated with any specific gender, but I find that sleeping your way to the top is. So, thank you, Jeff Lindsay, for not doing that to this character. Now, someone in the comments for a previous video pointed out recently that, and moving on a little bit, that Dexter says that he doesn't feel anything, yet he seems to have a soft spot for children. And again, in this chapter, he says he doesn't have a conscience, but it does seem a bit contradictory, doesn't it? Perhaps we'll find that Dexter does feel, he just doesn't realize it when it's happening. Because I've also picked up on a little bit of these contradictions, and I do think that Jeff Lindsay is doing it on purpose. I don't think that it is a mess up or a mistake in any way by telling us that Dexter doesn't feel, that he doesn't have a conscience, because we are getting this narrative from the perspective of Dexter. So it's what he feels and how he interprets himself and the people around him. So I think that it makes sense that he might not realize that he is feeling things when he does, or maybe even how to process these feelings. Dexter says that it's easy for him to get along with people because he doesn't have a conscience. So he just tells people whatever they want to hear. He describes LaGuerta in particular trying and failing to interrogate a key witness. She's so bad at it, actually, and her aggressive demeanor, the way that she speaks to him, actually causes the witness to shut down. And during the interaction, we're briefly introduced to Captain Matthews, so Captain of Homicide, and he comes right up to both Dexter and LaGuerta, because Dexter actually ends up having a small conversation with LaGuerta, and Matthews informs LaGuerta that Deborah will actually be assisting on the case because she has resources in the prostitution community, which is great for her because it's exactly where she wanted to be. But it does cause LaGuerta to bristle and refer to either the captain or Deborah. It's kind of left ambiguous, but she calls them by a derogatory slur. And this is after Matthews has walked away. But Dexter kind of infers that it could be about either one of them, but most likely it's about Deb. Now, I think that LaGuerta's reaction to this hints at an issue that she feels threatened by either someone else in general who could be potentially stepping on her toes during her cases, or that she's just threatened by another woman That's the problem. Either one of those or both could be true. I'm leaning more toward the latter, though, with her being threatened by other women. I think being a woman in an environment of mostly men, and I'm sure she's heard the rumors as well, I think has probably given her a complex about maintaining respect and authority as a female homicide detective. She even stares pointedly at Deb's cleavage when she goes up to speak to her later on, and insults her by the end of the chapter, even going so far as to imply that the investigation into the murdered hookers isn't important simply because they're just hookers. This statement also serves to cover up the fact that that she isn't good at her job, because from her perspective, the case isn't worth her time anyway. So there's yet more evidence to support that LaGuerta is threatened by and has a complex when it comes to other women. I hope that this character grows throughout the series and the book, because as it stands right now, she's not a very likable character. I don't appreciate brown nosers or women who bring other women down instead of lifting them up. That's not something that I appreciate in women in general, or female characters. Now, this chapter ends with Deb telling Dexter that she really wants to find the killer, and of course, with Dexter thinking the exact same thing, but for altogether different reasons, as we know. He mentioned earlier that sometimes he withholds info so he can get his hands on these killers before homicide does, which makes perfect sense. You know, his job is convenient, and he's got a hungry, dark passenger to feed. So that's the end of chapter 3. Join me next time on Friday for chapter 4, and let me know what you think in the comments. See you next time.